Have you ever felt like no relationship ever truly satisfies you? That once the compliments fade, so does your sense of worth. Maybe you're not seeking love. Maybe you're addicted to the feeling of being validated. In today's exploration, we'll uncover the hidden psychological trap that keeps you chasing approval and calling it love, and how to finally break free. What we often call love is not love. It is longing, it is hunger. It is a yearning for something far more elusive, not the soul of another person, but the reflection of ourselves in their eyes. Modern love, as we know it, has become entangled with an idea that to be loved is to be chosen, admired, desired. We say we want connection, but what we often chase is confirmation. We do not fall in love with the other. We fall in love with the feeling of being seen, approved, wanted. And here lies the great illusion. For many, love begins not with intimacy, but with a transaction, spoken or unspoken. If you see me, validate me, South Meg, I will stay. But this is not the sacred union Jung spoke of. This is not the alchemical fusion of two individuated souls. This is a contract written by the wounded ego, the part of us that still believes our worth is determined by the gaze of another. Love, in its true form, requires presence. It requires vulnerability, discomfort, and at times, even the dissolution of the self we've spent our lives defending. But we are rarely prepared for that. Do not come to love as whole beings seeking union. We come as fragmented selves seeking repair. When we say we want love, what we often mean is I want someone to make me feel worthy. I want someone to fill the spaces I am afraid to confront within myself. I want someone whose desire will silence my inner doubt. So we falkly, passionately, but not deeply, we fall into the warmth of attention. We fall into the illusion that the other person holds the power to finally make us feel complete. And then, almost always, the cracks begin to show at your authority when they forget to text, when they no longer compliment us, when their eyes no longer shine with infatuation. We do not feel the fading of love. We feel the withdrawal of validation. And that withdrawal cuts deeper than heartbreak because it confronts the very wound we try to avoiding, our fear of not being enough on our own. So many relationships begin with the intoxication of being noticed. And yet, beneath the surface, what we crave is not the person themselves, but what they mirror back to us. We confuse love with being desired. We confuse connection with being chosen. Being chosen does not mean we are loved. It often means we fit need in someone else's script, just as they fit a need in ours. We dress this up with romance, poetry, devotion, but underneath is often a quiet desperation, a plea. Tell me I matter. Tell me I am beautiful. Tell me I am not invisible. And in that plea, we miss the point entirely. Love was never meant to be a remedy for self-doubt. It was meant to be an expansion of self-awareness. Yet the illusion persists, because to be validated feels euphoric. For a moment, we escape ourselves. For a moment, we are not broken, not uncertain, not alone. And in that fleeting high, become addicted, not to love itself, but to the sensation of being enough in the eyes of another. Beneath the illusion of love lies a force that rarely speaks in words, but always pulls the strings. The ego, not the villain we so often make it out to be, but not the hero either. The ego is the architect of our identity. It defines the boundaries of who we believe we are, and more importantly, who we are not. But the ego does not find peace in stillness. It thrives in affirmation. It survives on approval. From early childhood, ego begins to form through the eyes of others. We learn who we are not by turning inward, but by watching how the world reacts to us. Were we praised when we smiled? Were we scolded when we cried? Did we earn love by being quiet, beautiful, obedient, clever? The answers to these questions became the food of the ego. And like any creature fed on conditional love, the ego developed an insatiable hunger for repetition. It wants more praise, more attention, more validation that its constructed self, this fragile image, is real, is worthy, is safe. But what happens when the ego enters a relationship? It does not seek union, seeks a mirror. It searches for someone who will play the part, the one who constantly affirms the role the ego has cast for itself. Whether that role is the beautiful one, the savior, the rebel, the victim, the giver, the ego needs someone who will reflect back this identity again and again, without challenge. When we say we want to be loved, it is often the ghost speaking. What it means, Ising, tell me that the image I've spent my life building is real. Tell me that I am who I pretend to be. Tell me that I am enough, but only in the exact way I've learned to be enough. But this creates a problem, because any deviation from that validation, any silence, criticism, or indifference is not just uncomfortable, it is perceived as annihilation. The ego does not take rejection lightly, even the smallest gesture. A delayed reply, compliment not given, a moment of being overlooked, becomes a threat. not just to the relationship, but to the ego's entire identity. And so the ego begins to react. It clings, it manipulates, not out of love, but out of fear. The fear of disappearing in the absence of being seen. This is why so many relationships feel fragile, unstable, emotionally exhausting. Not because love is failing, but because the ego is starving. It is trying to turn every glance, every word, every moment into proof that it still matters, proof that it is still worthy, proof that it exists. But the ego, as Jung taught us, is only a small part of the psyche. Yet when it is left unchecked, unobserved, and constantly fed by external approval, it becomes tyrannical. It begins to dictate our choices, hijack our relationships, and sabotage the very connection we claim to seek. And this is where the addiction deepens. Because the more the ego is fed by approval, the more it requires. It adapts. It raises the stakes. A compliment that once brought joy now barely satisfies. The partner who once made us feel alive now feels distant. Not because they've changed, because they are no longer echoing the script the ego has written. There is a moment in every relationship where the illusion begins to falter. The initial enchantment fades. The praise becomes ordinary. The partner begins to seem different. Or perhaps they haven't changed at all, but something has shifted within you. It is in this moment that something ancient awakens from within. The shadow. Carl Jung described the shadow as the hidden part of the psyche. Everything we reject, repress, or refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. The traits we disown, the desires we're ashamed of, the anger we were never allowed to express, the insecurities we keep buried so deep we forget they are even ours. The shadow does not die in darkness, it waits, watches. And eventually, I get project. We do not see others as they are. We see them as we are. Through the fractured lens of our unconscious, what we cannot face within ourselves, we place onto the people closest to us. A partner becomes too demanding, when in truth, it is our boundaries that are unclear. They become emotionally distant. When it is our own fear of intimacy that pulls away, they become controlling. When we are secretly afraid to take ownership of our lives, these projections are not random. They are messages from the soul, crying out for integration. But in our blindness, we blame the other. We judge them. We try to fix them. Or we try to flee, not from them, from what they reflect back to us. Relationships, in this way, become mirrors. Not the kind that flatter, but the kind that reveal. And the reflection is rarely easy to look at. What makes projection so powerful and so dangerous is that it feels real. You genuinely believe your partner is flawed, broken, selfish, unstable. You are convinced it is them who have changed. You feel betrayed, disappointed, frustrated, not realizing that what you're truly confronting is yourself. This is why romantic relationships often stir the deepest emotional storms. They do not just touch the heart, they touch the unconscious. They awaken the parts of us that we've kept hidden for years. And when those parts emerge, we think love is breaking down, when in truth, the psyche is beginning to speak. Because we live in a world that fears discomfort and idolizes perfection, we rarely stay long enough to listen. Instead, we move on to the next partner, the next validation, the next mirror, hoping it will show us a version of ourselves we can finally accept. But the shadow is patient. It will find its way back through jealousy, through neediness, through emotional withdrawal or obsessive attachment, each time disguised as a problem with the other person, when in reality, it is the self calling out for recognition. And so we live in cycles, falling in love, falling into projection, falling out, again and again, never realizing that we are not running from others. We are running from our own reflection, validation. It feels innocent, harmless. A kind word, a nod of approval, a compliment from someone we desire. But what if this small, subtle gesture, repeated over time, becomes a drug? We rarely notice the moment it begins. A simple message lights up your phone. Their attention lingers on you just a moment longer. They say you're beautiful. They say you're different. And suddenly, your entire inner world begins to shift, not because you are in love, but because for the first time in days, or maybe in years, you feel real. You feel visible. You feel for a fleeting moment enough. Carl Jung warned us that what is unconscious will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. And nowhere is that more evident than in our relationship with validation. You tell yourself you just like affection. You tell yourself it's normal to enjoy praise, but slowly, without your awareness, it becomes something more. You begin to crave it. You begin to measure your worth by it. You begin to associate your aliveness with whether or not someone else responds to you. And so, unknowingly, you begin the ritual. You dress not for comfort, but for reaction. You say the right things not to express, but to impress. You check your phone in the middle of the night, not for communication, for confirmation. The dopamine spike of being wanted replaces the slow burn of self-acceptance. You've tasted approval, and now your nervous system believes it's essential for survival. But here's the danger: validation does not last. It fades. It always fades. And when it fades, you don't just feel disappointment, you feel withdrawal. The same way a drug leaves the body, taking with it the illusion of power and pleasure, so too does the attention of another once it's gone, and you are left anxious, restless, hollow, not because love has been lost, but because your source of identity has vanished. This is not love. This is dependency. The other person is no longer a human being. They are a supplier of fleeting highs, of temporary escape, of emotional anesthesia. You return to them not for connection, but for your next hit. But the body keeps the score. The psyche remembers. Each time you chase validation, a part of you weakens. Authority, the true self retreats. The inner child remains unfed. The shadow grows stronger, knowing that you are not seeking healing, only relief. You begin to mold yourself to fit what others want. You become hyper-aware of how you're seen. You scan for signs of disinterest, constantly adjusting your tone, your opinions, your emotions, all in service of being accepted, and in doing so, you become a stranger to your own soul. It is a peculiar kind of suffering. To feel alive only when someone else says you are. To rely on borrowed light, never discovering your own. To become addicted to attention, while calling it love, while calling it passion, while calling it connection, when it is, in truth, a quiet erosion of the self masquerading as intimacy. There is a question we rarely ask. Not because we fear the answer, but because we fear losing the illusion. That question is simply, am I truly in love with this person, or am I in love with how they make me feel about myself? The difference is everything. True love is not comfortable. It does not flatter the ego. It does not feed on praise, nor does it dance to the rhythms of constant reassurance. True love emerges when two individuals, already whole in themselves, choose to walk the path of mutual discovery. Not because they need one another, but because they recognize the sacredness of being seen without masks. But ego attachment is different. It is loud. It is urgent. It is obsessive, idealizing, and incredibly fragile. The ego does not want to love. It wants to possess. It does not say, I see you. It says, you make me feel seen. It does not say, let us grow together. It says, don't ever change, or I'll lose the version of myself I've built through you. This is the lie of ego-based love. It pretends to be about the other person, but it is always about the self, not the true self, but the image, the constructed self, the persona. Carl Jung called the persona the mask we wear to survive in society, the mask of the lover, the provider, the perfect partner. And as long as the relationship reflects that persona back to us, the ego feels safe. The moment the mirror cracks, the moment our partner stops validating the role we've assigned ourselves, panic sets in. Not because we've lost love, because we've lost identity. In ego attachment, love becomes a form of control. We don't want the other person to be free. We want them to stay exactly as they were when they made us feel significant. We resist their evolution, their independence, their complexity. Not because we don't care, because we fear what their growth will reveal about our own lack of it. And so we cling, we over-explain, we become reactive, jealous, demanding. Not because we are evil, because the ego has fused our sense of self with their attention. We say we are heartbroken when they leave. But often, it is not the heart that is breaking. It is the ego unraveling. The structure we built around their validation begins to collapse. The role we played begins to feel hollow. The image we maintained begins to fade. True love does not operate from this place. It does not fear space. It does not rely on constant reassurance to feel real. It allows the other to be unknown, unpredictable, even inconsistent, because it understands that the soul is not a possession to be secured, but a mystery to be honored. Ego love is a performance, a careful dance choreographed around approval and fear of abandonment. It seeks safety, not intimacy. It wants promises, not presence. It says, don't hurt me, rather than, let me truly know you. And in this confusion, we call attachment love. We call dependency passion. We call control loyalty. And we wonder why our relationships, though intense, always feel incomplete. There comes a moment, quiet, unmarkable to the outside world, where you realize that no amount of love from others can make you love yourself. Not truly, not permanently, not in a way that silences the ache you carry when you're alone. It is in this moment that the real work begins. Not the work of finding the right partner, not the work of perfecting your image or strategy, but the deeper work, the inward journey Carl Jung called individuation. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is not about becoming better. It is about becoming whole. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means accepting the totality of who you are. The conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow, the love and the fear, the strength and the brokenness. It is the process of peeling away the layers of roles and expectations that you've mistaken for identity. It is the reckoning with your inner contradictions, your need for connection and your fear of intimacy, your desire for freedom and your craving for safety, your longing to be seen and your impulse to hide. Most people avoid this path because it is not easy, because it asks you to give up the comfort of being defined by someone else's gaze, because it asks you to stop waiting for another person to rescue you from yourself. In the absence of external validation, a void is revealed, and that void is terrifying. It is filled with unanswered questions, old wounds, unmet needs, all the parts of you you've spent a lifetime outsourcing to others. But Jung taught us that the gold is in the shadow, at your authority. That which we deny holds the key to our transformation. The love you so desperately seek outside of yourself is a reflection of the love you have yet to claim within. The validation you demand from others echoes the voice of your own neglected soul, whispering, "Do I not matter unless they say I do?" To individuate is to turn toward that voice, to stop abandoning yourself in exchange for someone else's approval, to learn how to sit with your own loneliness without rushing to fill it, to face the raw, trembling truth of who you are without dressing it up for applause. And when you do, when you meet yourself not with judgment, but with curiosity, something begins to shift. You no longer chase love to feel whole. You no longer confuse attention with intimacy. You no longer fear being alone because you are no longer alien to yourself. This is not a path that promises instant joy or constant confidence. It is a path of shedding, of releasing identities that were never yours, of grieving the self you pretended to be for love, of unlearning the belief that you must earn your place in the world through someone else's desire. Individuation does not mean isolation. It means standing beside another without needing them to complete you. It means seeing love as a meeting of two full selves, not a patch for brokenness. It means realizing that the ache you've been trying to fill is not a wound caused by others. It is the call of your own soul,
asking to come home.